You've become familiar with the properties of the most common controls in this session, but you've probably noticed that there are a few properties that are common to all controls. In this lesson, you'll look at some of the common properties and learn what they do. First, open the My Project sample file from your Sample Files folder. And open controlstest.aspx in Design View. We are now going to add some controls to the page. Add a label control and name it Label Test. Add a button control and name it Button Test. And add a calendar control and name it Calendar Test. We'll now see how the font properties are common to every control that has text. Set the font underline property of each of the controls to true. As you can see, the property has the exact same effect on each control. The font properties are available on all controls that contain text. All ASP.NET controls also have a visible property. If visible is set to false, the HTML code from the control is never sent to the user's browser. Try this out by setting the visible property of the calendar control to false. Now view the page in your browser and as you can see, the calendar control doesn't appear. However, if you view the source of the page in Internet Explorer, you can see that it isn't just hidden, it has been completely omitted from the page. Close your web browser now. Almost every control has height and width properties that can be used to determine their size. Set the width property of the button control to 150 pixels. And set the width property of the calendar control to 10 pixels. As you can see, the calendar control only shrinks slightly. This is because it can't shrink smaller than the content inside it. If you were to reduce the font size property of the calendar, it would shrink to a smaller size. Next, we're going to look at the Css Class Property. When you set a control's styles using its properties, the web server automatically creates CSS code to display them on the page. However, it's more efficient and organized to keep your CSS in a different file and assign CSS classes to your controls. You can do that on almost every control by using the Css Class Property. First, add a link to the site.css file from the Styles folder. To do this, switch to Source View and add the following line to the head tag. Link href equals styles rel/site.css, rel equals stylesheet, type equals text/CSS. If you now switch back to Design View, you can see that the CSS file has taken effect and the page's colors have changed. Now set the CSS class property of each of the controls to Failure Notification. As you can see, the font becomes red and slightly larger due to applying the CSS class. You'll also notice that it is still underlined. This is because any properties you set on the controls themselves will override the CSS class. Some other common properties include enabled, which determines whether the control is disabled or not. If you set the enabled property to false, the control will still be visible, but grayed out, to tell the user that the control will not work. The user will not be able to interact with the control. The Tooltip property controls the text that will appear when a user hovers their mouse cursor over the control. The Enable ViewState property you learned about in Lesson 3.9. The Enable Theming property determines whether theming is enabled for the control. You can learn more about themes in the Expert Skills course in this series. The Causes Validation property enables and disables the validation features you learned about in Lesson 4.8. And the Back Color and Fore Color properties control the background color and text color of a control. Remove the controls now and remove the reference to the CSS file. You've now completed Lesson 4.10, Use Common Properties.